Alrighty then, Ethereal here, and I did a build and gear video before, and I'm not gonna bother, but I've made a few changes since then, and noticed a couple other things that I feel make a rather large difference so far. So I decided to do an updated video. This time it won't have anything to do with my gear because the gear hasn't changed, but instead, there are a few small changes to my boons, namely, and another change to what powers I use in dungeons. So I'm gonna go over the whole thing because it's better than the old video anyway. I'm gonna start from start to finish, so you can completely ignore the old video. So this is the one I would go with. So let's get started with we're gonna start with feats. So what I'm going with now is I've had some slight adjustments, and I decided, okay, we're going to start with, I am a Pathfinder because of Careful Attack. Gonna start right there, so I've picked Pathfinder, and it's specifically because of the Careful Attack ability. It's an at-will. Now, you could still go Storm Warden. In this case, you're going to find yourself using Rapid Shot instead of Careful Attack, but we'll get into that later. So we take, the crit chance bonus, the toughness bonus, the agile combatant. You're always switching stances as a trapper. Anything that keeps giving you more damage when you switch is what you use. 6% bonus on your encounters, since they are the main source of your damage. The stamina regeneration is just for the extra points to fill this out. It was versus 2 in this and 3 in this instead, and I chose to go with the stamina regeneration. You're constantly dashing around. You're constantly bouncing. I mean, that's how this works. And then bonus damage from dexterity. So then we get into the Trapper tree. Really, in all honesty, Fleet Stance, Ready Stance, same difference. I already think that I generate more than enough AP as is. I'm constantly dailying. To the point where sometimes, I'm missing a good opportunity for a daily. So I think the bonus movement speed is better in my opinion. I go with Deft Strikes, obviously, because, well, if you read it, your melee and counter powers increase the damage of your ranged one, vice versa. So it's a really great, it's a 10% bonus damage on the next ability you're going to use. Trapper's Cunning, you could technically leave this out. This is probably more PvP than PvE, but I like it. I mean, you'd only be switching it out for something from one of these two trees anyway. And it's your crit, you apply weak Grasping Roots. So, but still, when you apply Grasping Roots, you reduce your cooldowns even more. Right there, Force Bond. When you apply Grasping Roots, reduce the cooldown by 5%. Just keep getting everything back. Ancient Roots just increases the duration. Useful for PvP and for soloing. And actually very useful for dungeons as well, thanks to Crushing Roots when it comes to ads. And I'll get into that later. Next you got Swiftness of the Fox. This is the bread and butter, one of the bread and butters of the Trapper path, where you use a melee and counter power, reduces the ranged and counter power cooldown by 15%, and vice versa. Since you're going to go 1-2-3, 1-2-3, you're reducing by 45% every time. And then you factor into anything from Force Bond and anything from, where is it? What am I thinking? Yeah, anything from Force Bond, you're getting a huge decrease. Thorn Roots, again, this is a requirement. When you have Grasping Roots, it does a huge damage. Even if they're immune to it, it's still going to hit them for a big thing. Serpent's Bite. You take this, Aspect of the Serpent will never leave your bar ever again. By the time you're going to get all of your stacks, assuming you get all 5 per round, which is entirely possible, you're getting an amazingly high buff. Huge damage buff. And then Biting Snares. Again, when you apply Grasping or Thorned Roots, Biting Snares, you gain 20% of your AP off a shift, increase your damage by 30%. The control durations is meh, but since, it's only okay, it's still got its use, but it's namely that 30% damage and that 20% AP generation, and it happens every 10 seconds, because you're gonna always apply these things. So that's why you go with the Trapper build, and you very seldom use your at-wills in Trapper, and in fact, I don't really use them in ranged at all, but It's not that Trapper's currently the viable one right now, although Archery has some chance, but Trapper's still just better. You just keep using your encounters. Anyway, so this is what I'm using. Seismic Shot, just like in my previous video, I say, it's the highest damaging daily we got. Obviously, with it being, this straight line, you gotta line it up very carefully. But in most dungeons, you'll see most of the mobs are gathered together on one or two targets. In my off, I'm using Force Meditation. This has almost never come in to help, but it's just there to be there. When it comes down to at-wills, if you're not a Pathfinder and you don't have Careful Attack, Rapid Shot's going to be one of them just to be something there. Now we're getting to the real pains. Aspect of the Serpent. You gain a stacking buff when you use a power. In one stance, they affect your melee. If you use it from range, they affect your melee. If you use it from melee, they affect your range. It's amazing. You just buff, switch, buff, switch, back and forth. It's really awesome. And combined with the feat that we were talking about, it's just going to wreck. So this is something you definitely want to max out to the 4-point thing as quickly as possible. I use Constricting Arrow. It's it's strong grasping roots for 1, so it immediately triggers Thorn Roots. For 2, it's one of the higher damaging encounters we got from a straight up shot. Albeit, you can think of a few other things that are useful, but I personally like Constricting Arrow. The stamina regen's only okay, but still, it's something coming off, and you don't want to use more than one charges ability, and you're going to be using Coordinative Arrows, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So you're kind of limited in your main ability here. Now, because I am a Pathfinder and I have Careful Attack, I take Aimed Shot, and it's not for the shot. I never shoot the damned arrow unless I hit it on accident. I use it for the melee, the bleed duration. The bleed is a lot of damage, especially combined with Careful Attack, because they trigger each other, even when you're running for your life. It's just another dot, and the more dots you can put up, the better off you are, I feel. The Ranger has a lot of dots or damage over times you can land on. Then you got Careful Attack, which is exactly as I said. This is what you keep it for. While I will use the ranged version once in a while, it's mostly just because it does debuff the target slightly. That's the only reason, and I use it specifically on bosses. I'll keep up the debuff. The less damage it's doing, the better it is for your party. Simple as that. But Careful Attack's what you really want. When you apply the debuff, every time he gets hurt, every time the target gets hurt, they take damage. This debuff lasts for some 25 seconds at the last time I looked. It's pretty ridiculous how long this lasts. So it's very, very helpful to have that up on the target, especially when combined with like the aim strike. And that's, like I said, it does a huge amount of damage over time. It's actually quite useful. Next, I use, obviously, Fox's Cunning and Fox's Shift. I mean, that's the reason you take an HR. You are probably going to be using that shift every 6 to 8 seconds, and the Cunning every 6 to 8 seconds, giving your entire party a free, get-out-of-jail-free dodge, avoiding all damage. Now, the thing is, you don't avoid crowd control with it. Don't forget that. You still can't afford to, stand beneath a falling rock and layer of Loudmouth, because it's going to knock you down, and then something else is going to hit you, and you're going to get bounced around and die. But it does allow you to just ignore any damage. And that can be huge, not only for your tank, not only for your healer, for everybody in the group. So it is an incredible ability. Now, Fox's Shift is dangerous. There are so many times where it will jump you around the field and put you exactly where you don't want to be. So you have to be very careful about your positioning with Fox Shift, and even if you are, there's not much you can do when it decides to just throw you under the bus. Literally. You'll get thrown beneath Loudmouth when he drops a fire pit right underneath him, and then you'll get hit by a rock, and you'll be like, what the hell? But I feel like this ability has killed me more than any ability in the game, including my enemy's abilities. I think my own ability has killed me. But at the same time, you need it to trigger the cooldown reduction, and it's a pretty good amount of damage. Along with it does give you a nice speed bonus. So it can be helpful. Now, the other passive I will use is Crushing Roots, and this is Crushing Roots is specifically for dazing the target. It's extremely powerful in dungeons against any ads. Obviously, it doesn't work against a boss. It may not be the best choice against something like Lostmouth with no ads, but the vast majority of bosses do have ads. So you'll have to take that into account. But feel free to, swap out for something else. In my case, I would generally pick something like Aspect of the Pack. If you've got a bunch of rogues, give them that CA, or maybe Aspect of the Lone Wolf just for some bonus deflect chance. Because that's a huge bonus deflect chance. But something to... Aspect of the Pack, I think, is one of the better ones just because it's party affecting. You get CA for everybody, and you may not get much use out of it, but it's a great ability for somebody like the Rogue. Otherwise, Crushing Roots is an amazing ability both for soloing and for any dealing with ag control. You have a lot of control. And the last ability is our hardest hitting encounter by far, Cordon of Arrows and Plant Growth. Now, Cordon of Arrows is a charged ability. Now, the problem with the charge abilities with the Trapper is that while the cooldown reduces, it still takes just as long for the charge to refund. So you will run into points where you don't have a charge up. But generally you're still able to reduce your cooldowns until you get one up. So it's still useful for that reason, but this is why you never use more than one charge ability for this exact reason. Now, it can be slightly difficult to land. It's really helpful, though, when you're running with, like, a wizard or somebody else who's going to pull everybody into one location anyway, and then you land it right there, and you guys just combo to completely wreck everything. And Cordon of Arrows is a huge AoE root that doesn't trigger Grasping Roots for reasons I don't understand. It even says it's rooting them, but it's not Grasping Roots. Nor is Cordon of Arrows, for whatever reason. I feel this is a problem. But, now the root, unfortunately, while it does damage over time, breaks if the target takes more than 500% of your weapon damage. Since it's your melee weapon, which is your lower damage weapon, it's not very high. It's still the highest damage encounter you got, but you never really get the whole use out of it, which is really sad. But, still, though, that's my opinion on the feats and the powers, and now we're going to go into boons real quick. Sharandar, I took power bonus. I don't need defense. The critical strike, I didn't need the deflect. Took the HP because we already get enough action points. I took the Elven Ferocity for the bonus damage. Faith Thistles, mostly because the other three are useless for you, and, well, Force Meditation is still kind of fun. Especially when mobs, or players for that matter, break themselves on it. Next you got Dreadring, 250 crit, movement, lifesteal over regen. Regen's kind of nerfed to hell, I'm not a fan of it. I chose the deflection chance over the armor pen, and that's because we have too much armor pen as is. I'm capped. I've been capped for the longest time. And while I'm in decent gear, I'm not even in the best by far. It's just a waste. I chose Shadow Touch again for the bonus damage. So far, I've been okay on taking it. And then, in my last video, I was using Endless Consumption, but in this, I decided instead to use Rampaging Madness. I feel it is actually a much stronger ability, mostly because of the huge power bonus and 4,000 lifesteal, just more chances to lifesteal. So Madness is a huge buff. And if you time it right with something like, say, like a Vanguard's Banner, you can do some extremely crazy shit. Icewind Dale, neither of these are very good starters for me, so I just took the AoE Resist. Again, not very good. I chose a Stamina Gain. Crit Severity, since I'm playing the higher crit build, yes. Recovery is useless on an HR. Never pick it up because all of your feats swap your stuff around anyway. I also chose to take Cool Resolve because you gain more power based on how much stamina or guard you're missing, and power's not your highest thing, but Cold Shoulder really doesn't do much because it might deflect like a tiny little 100 damage thing, so it's like, wow, what's that going to do? I'm not a big fan of it as much. Last time I used it, but I really think this is the better choice now. And then Avalanche. Just a nice little extra AoE. And then we're going to get into Tyranny of Dragons, 400 power versus hit points. That's iffy. It depends on what you're feeling. I chose the power because I think I've got enough HP. The crit, again, I'm going for the crit. I chose defense over armor pen because I have no use for armor pen right now. Again, I chose the lifesteal over the regen. I don't think regen's that great. I have not finished out Tyranny of Dragons, but I plan on putting 2 into Dragon's Fury and 1 into Dragon's Thirst. In the end, the lifesteal does help a little bit, but mostly I do want the crit severity, as I am playing the higher crit build. And then the PvP campaign, not most of you probably like. This was more of a. This was much more of a PvE video. Even though, I mean, my PvP powers didn't change from the last video. It's still, Rapid Shot, Hindering Strike here instead, and, Disruptive Shot. My PvP powers didn't change at all, so that's why I didn't bother going over them. But I'll show you that I do still use Legion's Valor and Vanguard's Resolve, and when I finally can get the last boon, I'm going with Wicked Assault. So that's my opinion on what you want to use for the Hunter Ranger in specifically mostly dungeons and what you should be looking towards. Of course, that's just my opinion. So, but and it's pretty much, I think it's fairly standard of a HR build. But what can I say? Still though, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that this was useful to you. So, let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree, or if you want to see more like this. And thanks so much for watching. Keep on being awesome.